Underneath the presser foot is where we see those little metal teeth that are little jaggedy teeth, a line of them. Those are called the feed dogs. Those are the same thing that you see on your sewing machine as well. So when you lift up the presser foot on your sewing machine, you're going to see those little feed dogs as well. That is what actually feeds the fabric forward. And you can see those in motion. If you turn your hand wheel towards you and look at the feed dogs at the same time, you're going to see those feed dogs are going down and they're coming back up. That's what's doing the feeding. So the feed dogs are what actually grab the fabric and move it forward through the machine, and they're working with the presser foot. So when you're serging, sewing, whatever you're using your machine for, you're going to put the presser foot down. It's going to press the fabric against the feed dogs. And then as you start serging, the feed dogs are then going to actually move the fabric forward. And one thing that you're going to notice that's a little bit different on the serger, if you take a look at those feed dogs, you're going to notice there's not just one, there's actually two of them. So there's two sets of feed dogs on your serger. And that's also why you're going to notice your presser foot is twice as long on your serger. That presser foot is longer because there are two sets of feed dogs underneath the presser foot. So this is one of the differences with the serger in terms of the way that it controls the fabric is we've got two feed dogs working together underneath the presser foot. And that is one of the reasons why when you start serging, you're going to really feel that it grabs the fabric from you. The serger just, in some ways just feels a little bit more powerful than your sewing machine. As soon as you put your foot down on the pedal, it really grabs the fabric and pulls it away. You can feel that it's a bit more forceful. It's because it's got twice as much feed happening than what you have on your sewing machine. And so it really is pulling and moving the fabric away from you with a little bit more force. And there's a few reasons why it needs to do that. So one of the reasons is that we are potentially using our serger for some different kinds of materials. So we may want to sew with knit fabrics. And if you are interested in using your serger to sew stretchy fabrics, again, to make a pair of leggings or a t-shirt, those fabrics are going to distort under the presser foot. So as the presser foot is and the feed dogs are grabbing the fabric, if you've ever tried to sew with these kinds of materials on your sewing machine or even on your serger, sometimes you may notice that you've sewn them and they now look a little bit wonky. They've warped, they're a bit stretchy, they're no longer flat the way they were when you first started. Part of that has to do with the fact that number one, they stretch, so they're moving, but then also the way that the machine is grabbing it has stretched it as it's sewing it down. And so one of the things that we can do to counter this from happening is a control, which is called the differential feed. So this is the dial that I skipped over earlier. The differential feed control is a control that's very specific to the serger. So it is a serger specific control. And the differential feed is designed to help counter the different characteristics of the different kinds of materials you might be wanting to use. So the biggest one being a knit fabric. So with the differential feed control, what we can do is we can actually get the first feed dog going faster or slower than the next one. And what this does is it differentiates the feed. So what this does is it basically, it will push the fabric faster through the presser foot, or it will slow it down. And this just is basically countering potentially the ways that the fabric is behaving. So the classic example is when we are trying to sew a stretchy fabric. When we're trying to sew a stretchy fabric, as the machine is grabbing it, it's actually stretching it out. So as the foot is naturally grabbing, pressing down on the fabric that's stretchy and then starts to pull it, the fabric then just naturally stretches out. To counter this, what we can do with the differential feed is we can actually get the feed dog from the back end to just go a little bit faster. So instead of getting stretched, what happens is it pushes the fabric a little bit faster. And then what that does is it just allows you to sew a flatter seam. So the differential feed control, if you look now again at the dial, so you're going to notice the dial will have just usually 4 settings on it. So mine has an N for neutral, yours may have a 1, and then it has a 1.5, a 2, and then it has a 0.7. So the differential feed just has 4 set numbers usually. Now, neutral or 1 on your serger just means that both feed dogs are the same. So it means that as you're surging, both feed dogs are going at the exact same speed and everything is normal. That's what you would use for most everyday serging, most regular woven fabrics that you might be working with. And then if you start to use something where you're noticing the material is starting to stretch out or get a little bit sort of distorted, then that is a situation where we're going to want to increase the differential feed. So we're going to go to a higher number. So the higher the number, the faster the differential feed, the faster it's pushing the fabric forward. So when we use a knit fabric, we're going to probably start maybe with the going up to the that's wrong dial. We'll probably go up to like 1.5, and I would do a little test then and just sort of see. So increasing the differential feed is just going to push the fabric in a little bit faster and prevent it from stretching out. And obviously you can go all the way up to 2. So we want to make sure that our settings are correct before we jump in. And so with the differential feed, we're going to, oftentimes it'll be an increased number for any type of knit fabric. And it's just, you stretchier the fabric, probably the higher the number. But again, I would just recommend doing a little test, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week as well. So the reason why you would use a lower differential feed, so if you were using, so we talked about using a stretch fabric, but perhaps you might be using a really fine, delicate fabric. So something that was maybe sheer, really lightweight, didn't have a lot of body. So maybe perhaps a silk or some kind of translucent fabric. What happens sometimes when you sew those kinds of fabrics, as you run them through your machine, you may notice that they're so lightweight that the stitches almost scrunch them up. And so you get a lot of puckering when you work with things that are quite lightweight. And so in that case, what we want to do to counter that is we want to just slow down that first feed dog so that it pulls everything back a little bit. So just by putting a little bit more extra tension, slowing things down, it will allow the fabric to just move a little bit more flatter and be stretched out as it goes in, and just keep everything flat. So instead of letting it compress from even just the tension of the stitches. So that is the 2 main ways that you use the differential feed. The thing about the differential feed is you can actually use it to exaggerate those 2 potential situations as well. So there may be a situation where you do want to stretch your fabric, or you do want to compress your fabric. So sometimes people will use the serger to gather their fabric. And so that is a technique that you can use your serger for as well, is you can purposely put the differential feed really high and then run your fabric through to purposely gather it. So that is another way that you can use the serger, or you can stretch it out. So if you put it down really low, if you've ever seen those, I call it like a lettuce finish on a scarf, or you can stretch out the edge of knit or get this wavy finish. And that's a technique that's done by exaggerating, or actually on purpose pulling and stretching out the edge of the fabric to create that little feature, that little design technique. So you can use it to counter the property of the fabric, or you can use it to exaggerate the property of the fabric. So that's the 2 main reasons why you would want to use the differential feed. But it is, to me, it is one of the things that really makes a big difference, understanding how to use the differential feed on your serger, because that's the difference between things getting a little bit wonky and wavy and then just being really flat and nice. And so we'll definitely work on that and work on understanding the differential feed, but it is one of those really key elements that you want to sort of get a handle on your serger. So that is that last control on your machine there.